Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his headset as the sleek black helicopter cut through the Manhattan skyline. As head pilot for Sterling Aviation, he'd flown this route thousands of times, transporting wealthy executives between their penthouses and private jets. Today's passengers was particularly demanding real estate mogul Jonathan Blackwood, who owned half the buildings they were passing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Take us lower, Rodriguez, Blackwood barked from the passenger seat. I want to inspect the new cleaning crew on the Meridian Tower. Can't have sloppy work reflecting on my properties. Marcus descended carefully, bringing the helicopter parallel to the 45th floor of the gleaming skyscraper. That's when he saw her, a woman in a simple gray uniform, suspended on a platform outside the massive windows, methodically wiping away the city's grime. Her movements were precise, professional, but something about her made Marcus's heart skip. As the helicopter hovered closer, she looked up and Marcus felt the world stop. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. "Elena?" he whispered, so quietly that his passenger couldn't hear over the rotor noise. The woman's face went pale as she recognized him. The squeegee slipped from her hand, tumbling 45 stories to the street below. The law firm of Hartwell and Associates buzzed with activity as Elena Sinclair reviewed the final contracts for the merger that would save Rodriguez Holdings from bankruptcy. At 28, she was the youngest senior partner in the firm's history, known throughout New York's legal circles for her brilliant mind and flawless track record. "Miss Sinclair," her assistant knocked on the mahogany door of her corner office. "Mr. Rodriguez is here for the signing." Elena smoothed her designer suit and checked her reflection in the window overlooking Central Park. The Rodriguez family aviation business was small compared to her usual corporate clients. But something about Marcus Rodriguez's determination to save his father's legacy had touched her heart. Marcus entered the office, clearly uncomfortable in his borrowed suit. His calloused hands betrayed years of manual labor, and his nervous energy filled the room. He was nothing like the polished executives Elena usually dealt with, yet when their eyes met, she felt something shift inside her chest. "Mr. Rodriguez, please sit down. I've reviewed everything, and I believe we can restructure your debt and avoid bankruptcy." "I can't afford your fees, Miss Sinclair. My family's already lost everything except the helicopters." Elena had worked pro bono before, but never for personal reasons. Consider it an investment in a promising aviation company. Quote, over the next 3 months, Elena found herself spending more time at the small hangar in Queens than in her Manhattan office. She told herself it was professional diligence, but the truth was more complicated. Marcus had a way of making her laugh that no one had managed in years. When he offered to teach her to fly, she said yes without hesitation. "You're a natural," Marcus said, as Elena guided the helicopter over the Hudson River. "Most people are terrified their first time up." "I'm terrified," Elena admitted, then surprised herself by adding, "but I trust you." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully. Marcus would bring coffee to her office during late-night strategy sessions. Elena would stay after hours at the hangar, helping with paperwork and learning about aircraft maintenance. They never discussed the obvious differences in their backgrounds. Elena's Park Avenue penthouse versus Marcus's studio apartment in Queens, her Harvard law degree versus his high school diploma followed by military service. "My mother wants to meet you," Marcus said one evening as they watched the sunset from the helicopter landing pad. Elena's stomach tightened. "Marcus, maybe we should talk about..." "About what? About how you're embarrassed to be seen with a pilot? About how your law firm friends would react if they knew you were dating someone like me?" "That's not what I was going to say." But Marcus was already walking away, his pride wounded. Elena wanted to call after him to explain that her hesitation had nothing to do with shame and everything to do with fear. Fear that once his family knew who she really was, everything would change. Elena spent the weekend agonizing over her decision. Monday morning, she arrived at the hangar with a bottle of expensive wine and an apology on her lips. Instead, she found Marcus's mother, Rosa Rodriguez, cleaning the office windows. "You must be Elena," Rosa said warmly, though her eyes held a hint of suspicion. "Marcus talks about you constantly." "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm sorry I couldn't make dinner yesterday. Work has been..." Demanding, I'm sure. Marcus mentioned you work in an office building downtown. Elena realized Marcus had never told his family she was a lawyer, let alone a successful one. To them, she was just Elena, someone who helped with paperwork and made their son smile. He's a good man, my Marcus, Rosa continued, spraying cleaner on another window. But he's been hurt before. A rich girl from the Upper East Side led him on for months, then disappeared when her parents found out about us. Broke his heart. The implication was clear. Don't hurt my son the way that other wealthy woman did. I would never hurt Marcus, Elena said quietly. Good. Because if you did, you'd answer me. That evening, Elena made a decision that would change everything. She quit her job at Hartwell and Associates, citing burnout and a desire for a simpler life. She moved out of her penthouse and into a modest apartment near the airport. She told Marcus she'd been laid off in corporate downsizing, that she was looking for something new. We'll figure it out together, Marcus said, holding her close. I love you, Elena. Not your job, not your money, just you. If only he knew there was no difference between those things in her world. For 6 months, Elena lived a double life. She took a job as a receptionist at a small legal clinic, using her skills to help while hiding her credentials. She learned to cook, to budget, to live paycheck to paycheck. Marcus never suspected that the woman struggling to afford groceries had millions in offshore accounts she couldn't touch without revealing her true identity. The charade might have continued indefinitely, if not for Jonathan Blackwood. Elena was leaving the legal clinic late one evening when a black sedan pulled up beside her. The window rolled down to reveal a man she recognized from newspaper society pages, one of New York's most ruthless real estate developers. Miss Sinclair. Or should I say, Miss Nobody from Queens. Elena's blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Get in the car. We need to discuss your boyfriend's aviation business. Against her better judgment, Elena complied. Blackwood's interior was all black leather and intimidation. Interesting choice trading Park Avenue for poverty. Very romantic. But romance doesn't pay debts, does it? What do you want? Rodriguez Holdings owes money to several of my subsidiary companies. I'm calling in those debts. Unless, of course, you'd like to return to your real life and write me a check. You can't do this. I can, and I will. That little aviation company will be mine by the end of the month. Unless you convince your boyfriend to sell voluntarily. Might be kinder than bankruptcy. Quote, Elena stared out the window at the Queen's skyline, where she could see the lights of Marcus's hangar in the distance. And if I refuse? Then Marcus Rodriguez will lose everything his father built, and he'll never know it was because the love of his life was too proud to help him. The car stopped outside Elena's apartment building. As she reached for the door handle, Blackwood's voice stopped her. Think carefully, Miss Sinclair. Some secrets are too expensive to keep. That night, Elena sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. She could call her former partners, liquidate some assets, save Rodriguez Holdings, without Marcus ever knowing the truth. But she'd learned enough about his pride to know he'd never forgive her for the deception. The next morning, she made another choice that would haunt her for years to come. Marcus, we need to talk. He found her at the hangar, pacing nervously between the helicopters. The early morning light caught the tears she was trying to hide. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I got a job offer. In Chicago. It's too good to pass up. Marcus studied her face, searching for the truth behind her words. Since when are you looking for jobs in Chicago? Since I realize this isn't working, we're too different, Marcus. I need more than this small-town life can offer. The lie tasted like poison on her tongue, but she forced herself to continue. I'm leaving tomorrow. I think it's better if we don't stay in touch. Marcus stepped back as if she'd slapped him. Just like that? After everything we've built together? We built nothing, Elena said, hating herself for every word. This was just a phase for me, a way to feel normal for a while. She walked away before he could respond, before she could see the devastation in his eyes, before she could change her mind and tell him the truth. Elena Sinclair disappeared from Marcus Rodriguez's life as suddenly as she'd entered it. What he never knew was that she'd spent her last night in New York transferring enough money into Rodriguez Holdings' account to keep the business afloat for years, an anonymous investor who believed in their potential. 3 years later, Marcus had built Sterling Aviation into one of the most successful helicopter services in the city. He flew corporate executives, real estate moguls, and celebrities across Manhattan, never knowing that the woman who'd broken his heart was the same one who'd secretly saved his dreams. And Elena Sinclair, once the most promising lawyer in New York, had become Elena Martinez, a window cleaner who worked the highest buildings in the city, close enough to see the helicopters she'd once helped finance, but invisible to the man she'd never stopped loving. Until today, when Marcus Rodriguez looked down from Jonathan Blackwood's helicopter and saw her face pressed against the glass of the Meridian Tower, 45 stories above the street, with nowhere left to hide. The helicopter maintained its position as Marcus stared at the woman on the window platform. Elena's face had drained of color, her hands gripping the safety rails so tightly her knuckles showed white against her work gloves. "What are you waiting for, Rodriguez?" Blackwood snapped. "I want a closer look at these workers. My buildings demand perfection." Marcus's throat felt dry. "Sir, we're already quite close. Any lower, and we'll be violating safety protocols. I pay you to fly where I tell you to fly, not to lecture me about protocols." Elena pressed herself against the building's glass facade, clearly hoping to avoid recognition. But it was too late. 3 years melted away as Marcus remembered every detail of her face. The small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood accident she told him about, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she was nervous. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled, "I think the cleaning crew looks adequate from here. Should we continue to the helipad?" But Blackwood was already peering through binoculars. "Interesting. That woman looks familiar. Can't place where I've seen her before." He lowered the binoculars with a satisfied smirk. "No matter. Let's head to the landing zone." As the helicopter pulled away, Marcus caught Elena's eyes one last time. The pain he saw there matched the ache in his own chest. Whatever had happened 3 years ago, whatever lies she'd told him about Chicago and needing more from life, the woman hanging outside that skyscraper was not living her best life. Back at Sterling Aviation's headquarters, Marcus couldn't concentrate. He'd built the company into everything his father had dreamed of, but success felt hollow when the person he'd wanted to share it with had vanished from his life. His assistant, Jennifer Walsh, noticed his distraction immediately. "Rough flight with Blackwood?" she asked, reviewing the day's schedule. "Something like that." Marcus loosened his tie, still seeing Elena's terrified face in his mind. "Jennifer, I need you to research something for me, quietly." "Of course. What do you need?" "Information on the cleaning company that services the Meridian Tower, specifically their employee records." Jennifer raised an eyebrow, but didn't question him. She'd worked for Marcus long enough to trust his instincts, even when they seemed unusual. Meanwhile, 45 floors up, Elena was having the worst day of her professional life, and that was saying something, considering she'd once defended a serial embezzler in front of the Supreme Court. "Martinez," barked Tony Castellano, supervisor for Clean Sweep Building Services. "What the hell happened up there? You dropped equipment, stopped working for 10 minutes, and caused a scene. Mr. Blackwood called personally to complain." Elena's stomach lurched. Of course Blackwood would call. The man who destroyed her life 3 years ago was now her indirect employer, owning the building where she worked. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so terrifying. "I'm sorry, Mr. Castellano, it won't happen again." "Damn right it won't. You're on probation, one more incident, and you're fired. We can't afford to lose contracts with Blackwood Properties." Elena nodded silently, changing out of her work gear in the cramped employee locker room. Around her, other cleaners gossiped about their day, who was rude to them, which offices were particularly messy, whose job might be next on the chopping block. Elena had learned to appreciate these simple concerns, after years of corporate law where a single mistake could cost millions. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate Maria Santos. "Rent's due tomorrow. You got your share?" Elena checked her bank balance. $247.83. Rent was $400 for her half of the tiny studio apartment they shared in the Bronx. Even with her 2 jobs, window cleaning during the day and night shift data entry, she was always behind. She could solve her money problems with a single phone call. Elena Sinclair's trust fund alone could buy the entire building where she lived. But accessing that money meant resuming her old identity, and she'd learned from painful experience that Elena Sinclair and Marcus Rodriguez existed in incompatible worlds. The subway ride home gave her time to think. Seeing Marcus again had shattered the careful emotional walls she'd built over 3 years. He looked successful, confident. Everything she'd hoped he'd become. The helicopter was clearly expensive, his uniform crisp and professional. Sterling Aviation had obviously thrived without her interference. Her phone rang as the train pulled into her station. Unknown number. Hello? Elena Sinclair? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Elena's pulse quickened. I think you have the wrong number. I don't think I do. My name is Detective Ray Morrison, NYPD. I'd like to speak with you about a case we're investigating. Elena's mouth went dry. I'm sorry, but I don't know anyone by that name. Ma'am, we have surveillance footage of you entering and leaving the law offices of Hartwell and Associates repeatedly over a 6-month period 3 years ago. We know Elena Sinclair worked there. We know she disappeared suddenly. And we know she liquidated several offshore accounts right before vanishing. Quote. The detective paused, letting his words sink in. Now we can do this easy or hard, but Jonathan Blackwood has filed a complaint alleging financial irregularities. And your name came up in our investigation. We need to talk. Elena's hands shook as she climbed the stairs to street level. Blackwood was making his move, 3 years later. Somehow he'd connected Elena Martinez to Elena Sinclair, and now he was using the police to flush her out. I'll need to call you back, she managed. Don't take too long, Miss Sinclair. We'll find you either way. The line went dead. Elena made it to her apartment building before her legs gave out. She sat on the front steps, head in her hands, trying to think. Blackwood had her cornered. If she revealed her identity to clear herself of whatever charges he was fabricating, Marcus would learn the truth about their breakup. If she didn't, she might face criminal prosecution. Elena, you okay? Maria Santos approached with grocery bags, concern evident on her face. Over the past year, Maria had become Elena's closest friend. Maybe her only real friend. A single mother working 3 jobs to support her daughter, Maria understood financial struggle in a way Elena's old law school classmates never could. I'm fine. Just tired. Bullshit. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maria sat beside her on the steps. What happened? Elena almost laughed at the accuracy of Maria's assessment. She had seen a ghost, the ghost of her former life, flying a helicopter 45 stories above the city. My past is catching up with me. The Chicago thing? Elena had told Maria she'd moved to New York from Chicago after a bad breakup. It was simpler than the truth. Something like that. Maria studied her friend's face. Elena, I don't know what you're running from, but you're one of the strongest people I know. You helped me when Sophia was sick and I couldn't afford the medical bills. You've never asked for anything in return. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. That evening, Elena sat on the fire escape of their apartment, looking out over the Bronx toward Manhattan's glittering skyline. Somewhere in that maze of lights, Marcus was probably reviewing flight plans or maintaining his helicopters. He'd built something beautiful from the ashes of his family's near bankruptcy, and she'd helped make it possible, anonymously, invisibly, but genuinely. Her phone buzzed with another unknown number. Elena? Quote. This time she recognized the voice immediately, deep, warm, slightly accented from his Puerto Rican grandmother's influence. Marcus. We need to talk. I don't think that's a good idea. Elena, I saw you today, on the Meridian Tower. I know you didn't go to Chicago. A long pause stretched between them, filled with 3 years of questions and regret. Where are you? Marcus continued. I'll come pick you up. You can't. It's complicated. More complicated than the woman I love telling me she needed a bigger life than I could offer, then ending up cleaning windows for the same bastard who tried to destroy my business. Elena's breath caught. What do you mean, tried to destroy your business? Blackwood. 3 years ago, right after you left, he called in debts we didn't even know we owed. Would have bankrupted us if not for some anonymous investor who bailed us out. Marcus's voice grew harder. Funny thing about that investor, they knew exactly how much we needed, down to the penny. Almost like they had inside information. Elena closed her eyes. Of course Marcus had figured it out. He was far too intelligent not to connect the dots eventually. Elena, who are you really? And why has Jonathan Blackwood been asking questions about you all over the city? Before she could answer, Elena heard the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching. She looked up to see aircraft lights moving across the night sky, heading toward her neighborhood. Marcus, where are you calling from? About 2 minutes from your location. Jennifer's good at her job. Finding people is easier when you have aviation resources. Elena's heart pounded as she realized Marcus was actually coming for her. 3 years after she'd walked away from everything they'd built together. But before she could process what that meant, her phone rang again. Detective Morrison's number. I have to go, she told Marcus. Elena, don't run again, please. But she was already hanging up, answering the detective's call as the helicopter grew closer. Miss Sinclair, we've had an interesting development. Jonathan Blackwood just amended his complaint. He's now alleging that you embezzled money to fund a criminal enterprise. Specifically, he claims you used stolen funds to bail out Rodriguez Holdings 3 years ago. Elena felt the world tilt around her. Blackwood wasn't just exposing her identity. He was framing her for crimes she didn't commit, using her genuine help to Marcus as evidence of wrongdoing. He's also provided us with evidence that you've been using a false identity for 3 years. That's identity fraud, Miss Sinclair. Multiple felonies. The helicopter was directly overhead now, searchlights sweeping the street below. We'll be at your apartment in 10 minutes with a warrant. I suggest you don't try to run. As Elena hung up, she realized she was out of time, out of options, and out of lies. In 10 minutes, she'd be in police custody. Marcus would learn the truth about her identity, her deception, and her sacrifice. And Jonathan Blackwood would finally have his revenge for her interference in his plans 3 years ago. The helicopter touched down in the small park across from her building, rotor wash bending trees and scattering trash. Through the apartment window, Elena could see Maria putting her daughter to bed, unaware that her roommate's carefully constructed life was about to explode. Elena Sinclair had spent 3 years learning to be invisible, but invisibility was no longer an option. It was time to face the consequences of loving someone too much to let them know who she really was. Elena stood frozen on the fire escape as police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The helicopter's searchlights swept across the building, and she could see Marcus in the pilot's seat, his face illuminated by the instrument panel. Even from this distance, she could read the determination in his expression. Her phone rang one final time. This number she recognized, her former law partner, David Hartwell. Elena, thank God you answered. I've been trying to reach you for hours. David, I can't talk right now. The police are being played by Blackwood. Elena, we need to meet. I have information that changes everything. There's no time. They'll be here any minute. Then get to the helicopter. I'm tracking the police scanners. You have maybe 3 minutes before they reach your building. Elena looked down at Marcus, who had spotted her on the fire escape. He was gesturing urgently for her to come down. David, what information? Blackwood's been under federal investigation for 2 years. Money laundering, tax evasion, racketeering. The FBI approached me last month asking about you, not as a suspect, but as a potential witness. They know about the anonymous investment in Rodriguez Holdings. They know it came from your legitimate trust fund, not stolen money. Elena's legs nearly buckled with relief. Why didn't you contact me sooner? Because I couldn't find you. Elena Sinclair vanished without a trace, but Jonathan Blackwood just made a mistake. By filing false charges to flush you out, he's given the feds exactly the evidence they needed to arrest him. Police cars rounded the corner, emergency lights painting the night in blue and red. Elena, get out of there now. Meet me at Pier 17 in 1 hour. I'll have FBI agent Sarah Chen with me. She'll explain everything. Elena grabbed her jacket and the small bag she'd kept, packed for 3 years. Old habits from her corporate law days when she'd learned to always have an exit strategy. She climbed down the fire escape as quickly as possible, dropping to the alley behind her building. Marcus had landed the helicopter in the small park, disregarding every aviation regulation about urban landing zones. He ran toward her as police poured into the front of her building. Elena, this way! She hesitated for one crucial second, 3 years of conditioning telling her to run, to disappear, to protect him from the chaos that followed her everywhere. But the sound of officers shouting her false name from inside the building made the decision for her. Elena sprinted toward Marcus, who caught her hand and pulled her toward the helicopter. Can you fly this thing legally in the city? She shouted over the rotor noise. Not even slightly. Marcus helped her into the passenger seat, then vaulted into the pilot's position with practiced ease. "But I know someone who can clear our flight path." The helicopter lifted off just as police officers emerged from the building, but Marcus was already banking toward the East River, flying low to avoid radar detection. "Marcus, where are we going?" "Pier 17. Your lawyer friend called my dispatcher 5 minutes ago, said to tell you the cavalry is coming." Elena stared at him. "You talked to David?" "Apparently he's been looking for you for months. Had to call in favors with the FAA to track down who might have aviation resources in the city." Marcus glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Elena, I need to know, is any of this real? The past 3 years, the woman I fell in love with, any of it?" The question hung between them as Manhattan's skyline rushed past. Elena could see Pier 17 ahead, where David's distinctive silver Mercedes was parked near several black SUVs that screamed federal agents. "My feelings were real," she said quietly. "Everything else was complicated." "Complicated how?" Elena took a deep breath. "My name is Elena Catherine Sinclair. My father founded Sinclair International Holdings. My trust fund is worth approximately $47 million. I was a senior partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in New York before I turned 29. Marcus nearly flew them into the Brooklyn Bridge. I met you when your business was facing bankruptcy. I worked your case pro bono, because something about your determination reminded me of why I became a lawyer in the first place. Then I fell in love with you, and everything became impossible." The helicopter touched down on the pier's landing pad. Another violation that would probably cost Marcus his license if they were caught. "When Blackwood threatened to destroy your company unless I disappeared from your life, I couldn't let him do it. So I transferred enough money to keep Rodriguez Holdings afloat, told you those awful lies about Chicago, and became Elena Martinez." Marcus cut the engine, and sudden silence fell between them. "You've been cleaning windows for 3 years because of me?" "I've been learning who I really am for 3 years because of you." Elena Sinclair was brilliant and successful and completely empty inside. Elena Martinez has friends like Maria who would give her last dollar to help someone in need. I've experienced kindness I never knew existed when I had money. Before Marcus could respond, David Hartwell approached the helicopter with a tall African-American woman in a FBI windbreaker. "Elena, this is Agent Sarah Chen. She's been investigating Blackwood's operation." Agent Chen shook Elena's hand as they climbed out of the helicopter. "Miss Sinclair, we owe you an apology. We've been tracking your financial transactions for months, but we didn't realize you were being coerced." "Coerced?" "Blackwood's been systematically targeting wealthy individuals who interfere with his business operations. You're the 7th person he's tried to frame for financial crimes. The difference is, you actually disappeared instead of fighting back, which made you harder to protect." David opened his briefcase, revealing thick folders of documents. "Elena, we've been building a case against Blackwood for 2 years. Your anonymous investment in Rodriguez Holdings was completely legal. Money from your trust fund, properly documented, legitimate investment in a struggling business. But Blackwood's been telling the NYPD that you embezzled corporate funds." Agent Chen nodded. "Which gave us the evidence we needed for obstruction of justice charges. Jonathan Blackwood was arrested 30 minutes ago at his penthouse. His entire organization is going down." Elena felt 3 years of tension drain from her shoulders. "What about the charges against me?" "Dropped. The identity fraud allegations were based on Blackwood's false testimony. You're free to resume your life as Elena Sinclair, or continue as Elena Martinez. That's entirely up to you." Marcus had been listening in stunned silence. Now he stepped forward, still processing everything he'd learned. "Elena, why didn't you trust me with the truth?" "Because I knew you. I knew your pride would never let you accept help from someone like me. I knew you'd think I was slumming, playing at being normal. And I knew that if you ever found out who I really was, you'd never be able to see me the same way again." "You're right," Marcus said quietly. Elena's heart broke a little more. "I would never have been able to see you the same way. Because the Elena Martinez I met at that legal clinic, the woman who shared her lunch with homeless people outside the building, who stayed up all night helping Maria when her daughter was sick, who learned to fix helicopters just to understand my world better. That woman is 10 times more amazing than any trust fund heiress could ever be." Elena looked up at him, hardly daring to hope. I fell in love with Elena Martinez. Elena Sinclair was just the woman who made it possible for us to meet. Agent Chen cleared her throat diplomatically. We should probably move this conversation somewhere less public. And Mr. Rodriguez, you're going to need to deal with the FAA about those unauthorized landings. Worth it, Marcus said, not taking his eyes off Elena. 6 months later, Elena stood in the offices of Sinclair and Martinez Legal Services, reviewing contracts for their newest client, a small family restaurant in Queens, whose landlord was trying to force them out through illegal rent increases. Her law degree was useful again, but now she used it to help people who couldn't afford representation rather than corporations seeking tax loopholes. Through her office window, she could see Marcus landing on the building's rooftop helipad, a properly licensed landing zone this time. Sterling Aviation had become the official transport service for Sinclair and Martinez, flying clients to court hearings and depositions across the tri-state area. Maria Santos entered the office carrying coffee and a stack of case files. Elena had offered to hire her friend as office manager after Blackwood's arrest made Elena's true resources available again. Your 3 o'clock is here, Maria announced. And Marcus wants to know if you're free for dinner tonight. Something about a helicopter tour of the city. Elena smiled, remembering their first flight together years ago. Tell him yes, but only if he promises not to fly anywhere near the Meridian Tower. Why not? Bad memories of window cleaning. That evening, as Marcus guided their helicopter over the Hudson River at sunset, Elena reflected on the strange journey that had brought them back together. She'd lost 3 years trying to become someone else, only to discover that love wasn't about being the right person for someone. It was about finding someone who saw the best version of you, regardless of which name you used or where you came from. Penny for your thoughts, Marcus said through the headset. Just thinking about how different things might have been if I'd trusted you with the truth from the beginning. We probably would have broken up anyway, Marcus admitted. I wasn't ready to believe that someone could love me for who I was, not what I could provide. I needed those 3 years to build something I could be proud of. Elena looked out at the city spreading below them, millions of people living their own complicated lives, making their own impossible choices between love and pride, truth and protection. Do you regret any of it? Marcus reached over and took her hand. Only the part where I almost lost you forever. As their helicopter soared over Manhattan, Elena spotted a window cleaner working on a high-rise building far below. For just a moment, she remembered the simple satisfaction of honest work, the camaraderie of her cleaning crew colleagues, the way the city looked different when you saw it from the outside looking in. Elena Sinclair had her old life back, but she'd never forget the lessons she'd learned as Elena Martinez. That wealth meant nothing without connection, that success was hollow without purpose, and that sometimes the greatest love stories began when someone was brave enough to clean the windows that everyone else ignored. The helicopter turned toward home, carrying 2 people who had finally learned that the best relationships weren't built on perfect honesty, but on the willingness to see clearly through whatever barriers, glass windows, false names, or wounded pride stood between them and the truth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.